Palmdale borders the harsh California high desert, a region defined by its desolate and unforgiving terrain. Situated 65 miles north of Los Angeles, it offers a peaceful haven for families seeking security. Summer winds often scorch the landscape, with temperatures routinely climbing past 100 degrees. The same held true on June 16, 2010. It was an afternoon meant for seeking shade and relief from the oppressive, blistering sun. Instead, it became a nightmare of violence for Lorine Austin and her friend, Lenel Barock. 28-year-old Lorine Austin rushed into the Palmdale Sheriff's Station, visibly shaken. Drenched in blood, she claimed her friend was murdered and the killer was pursuing her. She recounted a mundane afternoon of styling hair that spiraled into a heated domestic confrontation. The victim, Lenel Barock, had reportedly clashed with her live-in partner, a man identified as Lewis. Lorine insisted she stepped out to let the tension fade, returning later to find silence. After finding the house eerily vacant, she turned her attention toward the attached garage. There, she discovered a gruesome scene, blood everywhere and a shape concealed by plastic. Investigators found the first signs of violence in the laundry room, marked by crimson smears. However, the true depth of the struggle became clear only upon entering the garage area. Lifting the corner of a trash bag, Austin saw a pale, still foot with familiar nails. A desperate search for a pulse at the ankle confirmed there was no life. Peering further into the makeshift shroud, the full horror of the assault was revealed. Shot at close range, Lenel Barock's body was discarded like refuse in her own home. This initial testimony misled detectives for years, providing a smokescreen that protected the actual perpetrator, until the truth finally caught them. Atmosphere. Stillness. That summer, Lenel Barock appeared to be a woman who had everything within her reach. She had recently secured a sprawling 6-bedroom residence, filling it with the trappings of success. At 29, she moved through the world in a luxury sedan, personifying modern achievement. Her lifestyle was the fruit of long shifts and dedication as a licensed vocational nurse. Profiling the victim, investigators found a woman deeply admired by her colleagues. She was known for her exceptional empathy, often going beyond her duties for her patients. Her patients were individuals she treated with deep, genuine care. As the middle child of 5, her devotion to her family remained a central pillar. Frequent family visits and an easy charisma made her a beloved figure in every circle. A consistent honor student, her upward trajectory seemed like the natural outcome of a lifetime of ambition. Yet, behind the doors of her new home, a dark domestic friction was brewing. Her relationship with the Haitian native, Louis Bonner, was strained by his overwhelming sense of possessiveness. He frequently monitored her digital life, obsessively scrolling through every text and call. Any unrecognized number became a target for his interrogation and callback demands. He even policed her workplace, showing up unannounced to ensure she had not slipped away. His volatility had turned dangerous before, including a terrifying incident where he forced her car crash. Lewis's paranoia, however, wasn't entirely baseless. Lenel had been seeing a man named Iamuna since March. To maintain the affair, she utilized a secondary phone provided by this lover to avoid detection. This double life was a heavy burden, shared with only a single close confidant. Detectives relied on statements provided by the primary witness, her friend, Lorine Austin. Their bond stretched back to childhood, a lifelong friendship forged in the hallways of elementary school. Austin claimed they shared lunch on June 16, 2010, before buying salon supplies for a hair appointment. On the afternoon of the homicide, Lorine Austin reportedly witnessed the toxic jealousy radiating from Lewis. A volatile confrontation broke out between Lenel and Lewis concerning her interactions with other men. Seeking to avoid the conflict, Lorine departed the residence to let the couple settle their dispute. Returning several hours later, she found the home shrouded in an eerie, profound silence. Lorine's calls for her companion went unanswered, and with no sign of Lenel, she moved toward the bay to check if the victim's vehicle was still parked there. Upon entering the darkened garage, she lost her footing on a slick surface. Only after illuminating the room did she realize the horrific nature of the substance she had slipped in. Heavy plastic sheeting had been laid across the floor, now soaked in the victim's blood. Lenel Barock's BMW was reversed into the space with the trunk open, positioned near a large, black refuse sack. From the opening of that heavy-duty bag, Lorine spotted a pair of human feet. The sight of the polished toenails confirmed her worst fears. They belonged to her dear friend, Lenel. She reached down to check for a pulse at the ankle, but the flesh was cold and still. Paralyzed by dread, Lorine slowly peeled back the plastic to reveal the gruesome reality hidden inside. It was indeed Lenel Barock, her life stolen in a calculated and brutal act of violence. Retreating into the main house, Lorine's heart raced as a sudden noise echoed from the second floor. She informed deputies that a quick glance upstairs revealed a male figure brandishing a firearm. Terror-stricken, she bolted from the home, convinced the killer intended to silence her after she found the body. She fled to the precinct, arriving in a state of visible trauma and still covered in the victim's gore. The witness detailed the aggressive domestic dispute she had observed earlier that afternoon to the investigators. She recounted the discovery of the remains and the presence of the armed man on the landing. Her testimony alleged that Lewis was still present and had pursued her the moment she found the corpse. The individual stalking the residence, the one who purportedly drove her away from the crime scene with a weapon, was identified as Louis Bonner. On June 16, 2010, Lorine Austin stumbled upon a nightmare in a Palmdale garage. Her friend had been executed and discarded in a sack, while the perpetrator still lurked within the shadows. Spotting the gunman, she fled in a panic, certain the murderer was coming to eliminate the only witness. Lorine raced toward the sheriff's station, desperate to escape the threat she believed was behind her. She arrived at the station drenched in blood, explaining she had slipped while searching for Lenel post-argument. She proceeded to implicate the victim's partner, Louis Bonner, placing him at the scene with a weapon. She claimed he gave chase, though she managed to lose him during her frantic drive for safety. This account of the earlier dispute immediately painted a target on Lewis's back for the authorities. Lewis became the central suspect, and the case was handed to veteran detectives Joe Espino and Bob Kenny. Armed with these preliminary details, the investigators were immediately dispatched to the Palmdale crime scene. Upon arrival, the detectives noted a significant amount of physical evidence scattered throughout the area. A rolled-up rug was found protruding from the open door of the vehicle in the garage. They discovered a blood-stained photograph and discarded gloves before calling in the forensics unit for processing. Senior criminalist Mary Key led the forensic team, but Louis Bonner was nowhere to be found at the site. At that stage, authorities only had a first name and a description of a dark Nissan pickup. Investigators ran Lenel Barock's name through the Department of Motor Vehicles to identify any associated cars. Records indicated 2 registered vehicles, the blue BMW found at the scene and a second missing unit. While the sedan sat in the garage near the remains, the other car was a dark Nissan pickup truck, which was co-owned by the victim and a man named Louis Bormier. Simultaneously, detectives prepared for the agonizing task of notifying the family about the horrific murder. Delivering such news is a heavy burden, as the reaction to violent tragedy is always unpredictable. Emotions vacillated between paralyzing shock and raw, unbridled fury. To her kin, Lenel was an irreplaceable pillar of affection. It was the ultimate nightmare, one they never anticipated. Authorities eventually cornered Louis Bonner, arresting him on suspicion of homicide. During the high-stakes interrogation, Louis dismissed the allegations instantly, swearing that the detectives had apprehended the wrong man. Detectives Espino and Kenny, veterans with a keen eye for deception, detected troubling inconsistencies the moment they engaged with Louis. A convergence of incriminating factors rapidly coalesced, making Louis the primary focus of that evening's investigation. A mountain of evidence began to pile up, each discovery reinforcing the theory that he was the perpetrator. To begin with, a fresh, jagged laceration marked his throat. A visible abrasion on his left cheek caught the investigator's eye, prompting a direct inquiry into its origin. He claimed the wound was born of jealousy. Apparently, Lenel discovered him flirting on social media and lashed out. Furthermore, the suspect performed an elaborate display of weeping that was notably devoid of actual moisture. Investigators broke the news. Lenel hadn't merely been harmed. She was dead. A brutal homicide. His audible sobs lacked the physiological markers of true sorrow, leading investigators to suspect they were witnessing a calculated, theatrical performance. He painted a picture of domestic tranquility, insisting his bond with Lenel Barock was perfectly stable. This narrative, however, directly contradicted the volatile reality described by those closest to the pair. The victim's brother provided a chilling detail. He saw Louis managing finances online while scouring for tickets to Miami. This raised alarms. Given Louis's Haitian roots, the sudden interest in travel suggested a potential escape plan. The prospect of flight was terrifying, yet an even more incriminating revelation was waiting to be uncovered. While processing the crime scene, a Dear John letter was discovered hidden within the residence. Such notes signify the final, unwanted severance of romantic ties, a written notice of abandonment that no recipient ever wishes to receive. Though viewed as a cowardly method of termination, its impact is nonetheless absolute and surgically precise in ending a partnership. The handwriting appeared to belong to Lenel Barock, addressed directly to her partner, Lewis. The message was blunt. She was moving on with Ike, and any attempt to locate her would be futile. Discovering that document, combined with the suspect's known possessive behavior, provided a clear, dark motive. To the investigators, this was the ultimate psychological tipping point. They surmised this rejection pushed Lewis into a murderous rage, driving him to kill his partner rather than lose her. Despite the mounting evidence, Lewis remained steadfast in his categorical denial of any involvement. He provided an alibi, claiming he was nowhere near Palmdale on the day of the slaying. He claimed to have driven over 65 miles to south-central Los Angeles to buy components for his vehicle. He argued that the logistics simply failed. From his perspective, the accusation was a physical and temporal impossibility. Anticipating that a search of the truck would yield more incriminating evidence against him, the investigators were instead met with a revelation that completely upended their theory. Buried in the cab were sales records from Los Angeles retailers, timestamped exactly when Lenel Barock was being gunned down. Initially, it seemed these documents might serve as the very proof needed to clear his name. Skeptical, detectives pulled the surveillance tapes, only to find Bonner's face clearly visible on the screen. At 2:50 in the afternoon, he was captured entering the establishment alongside a mechanic named CGO Edmund. He was seen buying parts, then returned to the same location solo at 5:36 that evening for further transactions. Forensic digital analysis revealed his mobile device was communicating with cellular infrastructure along the transit corridor between Palmdale and Los Angeles precisely as the fatal shots were fired. The digital breadcrumbs, the visual proof, and Bobby Barock's testimony regarding his 6 o'clock arrival all aligned. It became certain that Lewis could not have returned to Palmdale in time to commit the crime. With the investigation stalled, authorities also exonerated Ekumana, the secondary love interest who had provided Lenel with the covert communication device. Devoid of motive or suspect, Espino and Kenny hit a wall. A series of startling revelations soon pivots the investigation toward a haunting and unexpected new trajectory. When detectives question the family, the mention of Lorine Austin, the friend who discovered the body, is met with total silence. For a woman claiming a lifelong bond, her complete absence from the family's history is a glaring psychological red flag. Digital forensics further dismantle the narrative, revealing that their communication history spanned a mere 4 weeks before the crime. Contrary to her claims of childhood friendship, the pair only met a month prior through a specific online personal ad. Their connection began in the shadows of a women-seeking women Craigslist post, far from the elementary school playground she described. Lenel appeared to have a perfect life until her path finally intersected with the enigmatic and troubled Lorraine. What started as a casual digital encounter quickly spiraled into a clandestine and intense romantic entanglement. If Austin's fundamental story was built on a foundation of lies, investigators began to wonder what else she was concealing. Within that quiet Palmdale residence, the hunt for the killer is rapidly intensifying into a fever pitch of forensic scrutiny. The witness account of a heated dispute between the victim and her boyfriend hours before the murder simply does not hold. Solid evidence places the boyfriend over 65 miles away from the residence at the precise moment the life was taken. His movements were corroborated. He had traveled 65 miles into south-central Los Angeles to source components for his vehicle. Stripped of a clear motive or a viable suspect, detectives Espino and Kenny find themselves staring into a cold, investigative void. The sheriff's team is now forced to scrutinize every syllable of the testimony provided by the supposed friend. They suspect a deeper layer of deception beneath her words. Unlike the victim, Austin lacked any stability. She owned no home, held no career, and possessed no luxury assets. Beneath her facade simmered a toxic blend of resentment and envy, likely fueled by her lack of steady employment. Her financial records revealed a desperate reality of chronic instability and ruined credit. Every account to her name, from student loans to basic utility bills, was either in collections or had been completely written off. Investigators uncovered a pattern of pathological lying. She frequently claimed to be a nurse living in an affluent neighborhood. She boasted of driving a BMW and living a high-status life, details that belonged to Lenel, not herself. It appeared that Austin was systematically attempting to consume and inhabit the victim's very identity. A closer look confirms their relationship was a brief 30-day flash in time rather than a lifelong bond. Beyond her infidelity with Ike, Lenel was engaged in a secret physical affair with the very woman who reported her. Their meeting on a Craigslist message board added a sinister new dimension to the case file. Detectives began digging into the victim's private digital life with renewed urgency. The investigation revealed that Austin was a highly calculated and active participant in multiple online subcultures. She was simultaneously managing flirtations with 3 women while maintaining physical relationships with 2 others alongside her affair with Lenel. Phone logs confirmed the digital dialogue between the victim and Austin only originated about 30 days prior to the killing. The story of childhood friendship was a complete fantasy. They were essentially strangers who had recently become intimate. 4 days before her death, Lenel sent a message that effectively severed their physical and romantic connection. She explicitly stated her intention to focus exclusively on rebuilding her long-term relationship with Lewis. The text was clear and final, a request to end the sexual activity and return to being just friends. While Austin outwardly appeared to accept the rejection, she insisted on maintaining a close presence in the victim's life. Unaware of the brewing psychological storm, Lenel consented to keep the friendship alive. Austin initially told police they spent June 16th shopping and styling hair, painting a picture of domestic tranquility. Detectives now realize that every detail of that afternoon's timeline was a meticulously crafted fabrication. The domestic dispute was a ghost story. The boyfriend never arrived, and the fight never actually took place. With the alibi debunked, a chilling question remains. What truly transpired behind those closed doors that final afternoon? With the victim silenced forever, the only source of truth is the person whose narrative is rapidly disintegrating. Austin now meets all the criteria for a prime suspect, forcing the sheriff's department to shift their full focus. She possessed the means, the hidden motive, and the perfect window of opportunity. Detectives Espino and Kenny requested that she submit to the psychological pressure of a polygraph examination. While often used as an investigative tool, these lie detector results remain inadmissible in a California court of law. While rarely definitive, these examinations serve as vital barometers for law enforcement, signaling whether a person of interest warrants further scrutiny or if a shift in strategy is required. Austin verbally consented to the procedure, but she proved remarkably elusive when the time came to actually step inside the precinct. Frustrated by her evasions, investigators unearthed digital footprints, showing she had researched techniques to manipulate lie detector results. Her actions painted a portrait of guilt, forcing authorities to weigh the implications of her deceptive behavior. Was the proposal to weave Lenel's hair merely a calculated ruse to gain physical access? Senior criminalist Mary Keyes, working with the medical examiner, confirmed the fatal blow was a single gunshot wound to the occipital region. The forensic trajectory indicated the projectile traveled along a sharp downward path. This suggests a cold-blooded execution, implying the victim was likely immobilized or submissive while the killer stood directly behind them. The killer's identity remained a chilling void in the investigative file. Only one grim reality was indisputable at that stage of the inquiry. Physical evidence suggested she never anticipated the fatal moment. 29-year-old Barock was executed in her high-end Palmdale residence, her lifeless form discarded in the garage. Initial responders were greeted by a crime scene saturated with potential forensic indicators. Detectives Espino and Kenny scrutinized her volatile boyfriend, Louis Bonner, yet his movements were corroborated by a solid alibi. Bonner maintained he was 65 miles away in south-central Los Angeles, sourcing components for his vehicle. The investigation soon pivoted toward a clandestine, intimate relationship between the victim and Lorine Austin. Further scrutiny revealed that Austin's desires likely transcended the boundaries of a simple physical entanglement. Processing the scene proved difficult due to the sheer volume of chaotic debris. Plastic sheeting lined the floor in a crude concealment attempt, while a vehicle sat ominously in the garage. Inside the victim's BMW, investigators found a cache of used chemical agents and scrubbing tools. A rolled carpet, seemingly snatched from the interior, had been shoved onto the car's rear seat. Scattered throughout were the remnants of a desperate, failed effort to scrub away the violence. Latex gloves and a pitcher lay discarded amidst a pervasive, sickening spray of crimson. Mary Keyes faced the grueling challenge of isolating the few critical clues from within that overwhelming labyrinth of evidence. Investigators Espino and Kenny shifted their primary focus toward Austin, the victim's former companion. Austin's narrative began to fray. Their supposed lifelong bond was a fabrication covering a recent acquaintance. Her claims of witnessing a domestic dispute were impossible, as Bonner was 65 miles away at the time. As Austin continued to evade formal questioning and the lie detector, police were forced to rely exclusively on the cold, hard facts left at the scene. Analysis confirmed the garage was merely a staging area, not the original site of the shooting. The fatal shot echoed in the living room before Barock's body was dragged to its final location. The carpet discovered in the BMW was forensically linked back to the home's main living space. Under a luminol spray, the rug glowed with a terrifying intensity, revealing a massive blood signature. Forensic light exposed a pair of unmistakable, gore-stained footprints. These marks suggested someone used their weight to fold the bloodied fabric into the vehicle. The patterns confirmed a body had been hauled across the fibers, leading to another chilling breakthrough inside. A sinister trail of hemoglobin stretched from the presumed murder site in the parlor, winding through the kitchen and laundry area before terminating in the cold garage. After moving the remains and the rug, the perpetrator attempted to wipe the floors clean, seeking to sanitize the truth. Buried within the blood-soaked carpet fibers were hair-weaving needles. If the hair appointment never happened, how did Austin's professional tools end up in the center of a bloodbath? Inside the garage, a gray plastic pitcher bore a solitary crimson fingerprint on its outer surface. The positioning suggested a deliberate, albeit failed, attempt by the individual to avoid leaving any tactile evidence behind. Forensic analysis ultimately identified the owner of that sanguine mark as Lorine Austin. While the blood was the victim's, the print belonged to the suspect. Nearby, discarded cleaning supplies yielded a pair of black rubber gloves. Upon laboratory examination of these items, tests confirmed the victim's blood on the exterior, while DNA recovered from the interior pointed directly to Lorine Austin. Then came the Dear John letter, a document initially framing the jealous boyfriend. Signed as Lenel, it informed Louis Bonner of her departure for a man named Ike. The text stated that Louis could keep the residence and all its contents. It claimed she was fleeing the state, warning him against any pursuit. However, Lenel Barock was an intelligent, highly educated individual. The crude language and fractured grammar within the note seemed entirely inconsistent with her character. It felt fabricated. The letter read, "Dear Louis, I am leaving for Ike. He earns more, so the house is yours to deal with. I am relocating out of state with Ike, which is the reason I provided you that telephone. We are wedded soon, so do not contact me. Everything in the home belongs to you now. I have been involved with him for 4 months. He covers my vehicle payments, so good luck with your life. Postscript. I am taking 1 television set. Farewell, Lenel." Criminalists compared the script to Lenel Barock's known handwriting samples, finding no correlation between the two. The penmanship was a definitive match for Lorine Austin, proving she was the true author of the forgery. This fabricated Dear John letter served as the primary instrument to frame Louis, marking a critical piece of evidence. Detectives also discovered a pillow at the site, seemingly repurposed as a primitive suppressor for a firearm. It had been pressed against the victim's skull during the shooting to dampen the report of the weapon. Investigator Keene recovered a spent shell casing, identified as originating from a 9mm handgun. Though the actual murder weapon remained elusive, investigators established that Lorine Austin was the registered owner of a 9mm pistol. On the evening of the homicide, when Lorine entered the sheriff's station, a search of her handbag revealed an otherwise vacant, oversized bag containing only her identification and 2 rounds of live ammunition. She offered no justification for the presence of these unfired rounds. Microscopic analysis showed the live rounds from her purse bore extraction marks identical to the casing found at the scene. Lorine was caught in a lie concerning her personal history with Lenel. The pair had been involved briefly, but Lenel had terminated the romance just 4 days prior to her death. Pathologists concluded the fatal shot occurred in the living room. The downward trajectory suggests Lenel was likely seated when struck. A mountain of physical evidence placed Lorine at the scene during the time of the execution. Her fingerprints stained the very tools utilized to scrub away the evidence of the crime. Lorine's genetic profile was extracted from inside rubber gloves saturated with the victim's blood. The note to Louis was definitively proven to be a forgery authored by Lorine. Through the exhaustive efforts of detectives Espino and Kenny, combined with Mary Key's forensic findings, prosecutors finally secured enough evidence to charge Lorine Austin with the murder of Lenel Barock. Surveillance units maintained a constant vigil over her residence, monitoring every individual who entered or exited the premises. They watched for any sign of her return, but she remained elusive. As authorities moved to execute the warrants, Lorine Austin simply vanished. Lenel Barock was executed by a single shot to the head, her remains abandoned in her Palmdale garage. From the outset, the crime scene offered investigators a wealth of forensic clues. DNA belonging to Lorine was discovered inside gloves soaked in the victim's blood. Then there was the Dear John letter, which initially seemed like an indictment of the victim's boyfriend. Despite Lenel's signature, experts proved the document was actually penned by Lorine. When the investigation concluded, every piece of evidence converged on a single suspect, Lorine Austin. The moment detectives Joe Espino and Bob Kenny arrived to serve the warrant, Lorine was gone, leaving only a cold trail. Investigators constructed a chilling profile that aligned perfectly with the mounting physical evidence against her. Financial records painted a grim picture. Lorine was jobless and drowning in debt while pursuing Lenel. Whispers suggested she was obsessed, nearly attempting to inhabit Lenel's very identity. She fabricated a career in nursing and flaunted a luxury vehicle, both nothing more than hollow lies. The investigators theorized she viewed Lenel Barock as a financial lifeline, a desperate ticket out of her own hardship. Once the relationship crumbled, however, the opulent future Lorine envisioned was shattered beyond repair. Even as their physical intimacy concluded, Lorine manipulated her way back in, convincing Lenel to stay close. 4 days after their split, she arrived to style her hair. Lenel's downfall was perhaps her own benevolence, her unwavering tendency to find the light in others. She was blind to the darkness ahead. The offer to braid her hair was merely a trap to ensure she was defenseless. There is a small mercy in the tragedy. She likely never felt the blow or saw her end coming. If Lorine couldn't secure the comfort she craved through Lenel, if she couldn't reside in that luxury herself, she ensured no one else would ever have the chance. Taking her life was only the opening act. The next task involved the grim disposal of the remains and erasing the crime. But Austin's attempt to sanitize the environment was amateurish and ultimately incomplete. Whether hindered by haste or incompetence, the forensic map clearly showed the gunshot and the path to the garage. With the body hidden in the garage, detectives suspect she intended to use Lenel's BMW. The trunk was already packed with used cleaning equipment. The living room rug, saturated with blood, had been rolled up and shoved into the vehicle's rear seat. Palmdale borders the desolate expanse of the high desert. Those barren sands have long served as a silent graveyard for those seeking to hide their sins. Forever. The region is not just vast and isolated, away from any prying eyes, but the blistering heat acts as a catalyst for decay, destroying forensic traces with ruthless efficiency. Had she reached those dunes, she might have walked away from this atrocity, a free woman. Instead, she was thwarted by her own exhaustion and the sudden onset of blinding terror. Her secondary plan was just as chaotic and poorly executed as her primary vision of a desert burial. Lorine finished her meager attempt at cleaning the residence as best she could. She scribbled a frantic letter to Lewis, claiming she was cutting ties and fleeing for good. Next, she performed a desperate charade at the station, claiming she was being hunted to frame Louis Bonner. It was pure fiction. The physical evidence pointed elsewhere, and Lewis possessed an airtight, undeniable alibi. Once he was exonerated, the full weight of the investigation turned back toward Lorine. Authorities proceeded with extreme caution, needing every detail perfectly aligned before they made their move to seize Lorine Austin. With a solid narrative and the forensics to support it, the final step was taking her into custody. Yet, catching her proved to be a far more elusive task than anyone anticipated. She vanished, and for over 12 months, the search for her went completely cold. With no leads on her whereabouts, investigators eventually sought help from the national public. The case was eventually spotlighted on the nationwide program, America's Most Wanted. By December 2011, 18 months after the killing, her image was displayed across the country. Information began to surface, forcing detectives to sift through a sudden deluge of potential sightings. The most credible report suggested she was hiding in Punta Gorda. This was a secluded coastal village in Belize, nestled deep within Central America. Punta Gorda, Belize, stands in stark contrast to the affluent landscape of Palmdale. A tipster from New York reached out with a startling revelation for investigators. While visiting family in Guatemala, he witnessed a relative arrive with an unexpected companion. He recognized that woman from a recent homicide profile on America's Most Wanted. The identification was precise, yet apprehending a fugitive abroad presented a massive challenge. International manhunts are rarely a simple undertaking for local law enforcement. Detectives possessed enough incriminating evidence to indict Lorine Austin for murdering Lenel Barock. One critical element remained elusive: the physical location of the suspect herself. Austin had vanished, leaving detectives Espino and Kenny with a year-long cold trail. Authorities eventually turned to the public to help break the mounting silence. Following a late 2011 broadcast 18 months post-crime, the investigation finally gained momentum. Crucial leads surfaced, pointing toward Punta Gorda, Belize, after a New York resident called. The witness explained that while visiting Guatemala, a cousin introduced his new domestic partner. He instantly identified the woman as the high-profile fugitive featured on the television program. Identification was absolute. Extracting a suspect from foreign soil requires high-level coordination between multiple agencies. Detectives Espino and Kenny mobilized the FBI's task force to engage with Belizean officials. Once the diplomatic hurdles were cleared, the tactical search for the fugitive commenced. Investigators learned that Austin was living under the deceptive pseudonym Crystal. On January 25th, a joint operation resulted in her arrest for immigration violations. Within 24 hours, on January 26, 2012, she was deported and escorted to Houston. A follow-up segment aired in February 2012 to update the audience. The broadcast highlighted how citizen tips led directly to Austin's eventual capture. During questioning, Austin seemed more disturbed by her social reputation than the charges. Facing an indictment for first-degree murder, she maintained her innocence during her September 2012 arraignment in Antelope Valley. The court ordered her held on a $2 million bond. After years of legal maneuvering, the homicide trial opened in mid-2015. Over 3 weeks, prosecutor Jason Carino meticulously presented the state's forensic evidence. The investigative timeline was reconstructed alongside physical artifacts recovered from the scene. The prosecution posed a central, psychological question to the seated jury. If Austin were truly innocent, why did she flee for over a year? Defense attorney David Kwok attempted to shift suspicion toward Lenel's former boyfriend. Kwok highlighted past domestic turbulence between Lenel and Louis Bonner as motive. He argued that jealousy regarding Austin and another lover drove Bonner to violence. This strategy proved as ineffective as Austin's initial attempts at deception. Bonner's alibi, placing him in south-central Los Angeles, remained completely indisputable. On August 13, 2015, the jury returned a swift guilty verdict, convicting her for the fatal shooting of Lenel Barock. On August 26th, she received 50 years, with parole eligibility in 2042. The judge handed down 25 years for murder and 25 for the weapon, a consecutive sentence for the calculated use of a firearm during the killing. One cannot easily profile a killer. Austin defied the stereotypical image of a murderer. Her outward demeanor betrayed no sign of the cold violence she committed. Experts argue no universal profile exists for a predator, yet she defied every conventional image of a murderer that haunts the psyche. During the trial, a woman dating Lorine in 2010 simultaneously with Lenel testified she felt lucky to survive. She had clearly been another intended victim for Lorine. Whether Lorine Austin would have struck again remains a mystery, as this brutal murder ensured she was finally apprehended. Darkness doesn't always dwell in the shadows. Sometimes, it smiles right at you from across the dinner table. The story of Lenel Barock, a woman who spent her days healing others as a nurse, is a chilling testament to the fact that while kindness is a superpower, it must never become a blindfold. In a world of curated lives, envy is a silent, predatory poison. There are those who don't just want your success, they want to inhabit your very identity. They wear masks of friendship, woven from the same threads as your generosity, waiting for the precise moment to extinguish your light. This tragedy reminds us that the most dangerous weapon isn't always a cold piece of steel. It's the deception of someone you called a friend. Let this be your shield. Your intuition is a gift. Never ignore its whispers. We are taught to find the light in everyone, but we must also be brave enough to acknowledge the darkness. Protect your peace and guard your inner circle fiercely. Not everyone who seeks your warmth deserves a place by your fire. Honor the memory of the fallen by living vibrantly. But stay vigilant. The most heartbreaking betrayal always comes from the person you never saw coming.